And now back to Ask Pastor Deb on WOSDRadio.com.
Welcome back to Ask Pastor Deb. We're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to continue with our sermon, Make Me Wanna Holler. The healthiest and the most recuperative thing on the earth to do is to stop thinking so much about ourselves and go to thinking about the welfare of others. That's what Job did. He thought about praying to God for his friends, even through all of the suffering that he was going through. And he really suffered. I don't know how Job did it. And even Marvin Gaye, during his suffering time, it seemed like it was just thing after thing after thing that was coming at both of them, Job and Marvin. I've truly been there, and I know some of you have been there as well. It doesn't make the suffering any easier. So, Job had been studying his misfortunes, but the more he thought about his bankruptcy, the poorer he seemed. And the more he thought of his boils, the worse they hurt. The more he thought of his fortune, marriage, the more unbearable it became. The more he thought about his unfortunate marriage, the more unbearable it became. The conjugal relationship. The more he thought of his house blown down, the more terrific seemed the cyclone. His misfortunes grew blacker and blacker. But there was to come a reversal of these sad conditions. One day, he said to himself, I have been dwelling too much on my bodily sicknesses and my wife's temper and my bereavements. It is time I began to think about others and do something for others, and I will start now by praying for my 3 friends. Can you imagine everything that you've gone through, everything that you're going through, that you stop and you think about not yourself, but others, your friends? Then Job dropped upon his knees, and as he did so, the last shackle of his captivity of trouble snapped and fell off. God will provide, and God will restore. I don't care what you're going through, and it seems like there's no end of the road that you're traveling. There's just no light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm a living witness that God will provide and God will restore. Verse 15 says, and the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. And he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters. The Lord provided for Job after his suffering was over. Job ended up with more possessions than he had before his suffering. The Lord doubled the righteous man's material possessions. Job had the same number of sons and daughters after his suffering than before. He dared not forget the Lord's great provisions in suffering. I've already mentioned the spiritual blessings that God gives through suffering. I dare not forget, however, that all suffering prepares us for that heavenly home God has prepared for all of us. It will be a glorious thing for us to lay aside this body of flesh, this beat down body, this teared and torn body. This light momentary affliction is preparing us an eternal weight of glory beyond our comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18 says, "For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." Revelation 14 and 13 says, "I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." And Paul says in Philippians chapter 1, verses 21 and 23, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I shall choose I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better." Paul received that which is far better through suffering. It was only when Nero cut off Paul's head did Paul die and get his gain. That should make you want to holler. Which brings us to our third and final point. The third thing that should make you want to holler is when your holler is a praise. Job chapter 42, verses 16 and 17. After this, Job lived 142 years. He saw his children and their children to the fourth generation. And so Job died an old man and full of years. When it was all said and done, Job realized that the world God creates is far more beautiful and wow than he understands, and that God is intensely present in all the beauty and the chaos and the suffering. I can hear him saying the last part of Inner City Blues make me want to holler. Mother, mother, everybody thinks we're doing wrong. Who are they to judge us? Simply 'cause I wear my hair long. And you and I. Oh, wow. I could really sing that part. You and I and people of all religions, faiths, are going to be pondering the problem of suffering for a long time. Perhaps many of us can remember a moment when we realized that bad things do happen to good people and our faith was deeply challenged. That faith has to either diminish or mature. The God we heard of when we were small children isn't necessarily what God is actually like when we grow older and see how complex and untamed and marvelous the world really is. And as Christians who believe in a God who suffers with us, it is all the more important for us to enter the conversation about pain with our God. When I volunteer as a hospital chaplain, I hear my chronically ill patients and their families say, I know you're not supposed to question God, Pastor Deb. But sometimes I do wonder why all of this is happening to us. And most times, I would just let them speak their thoughts out loud without responding. I believe there is almost nothing less biblical than the notion that we are not supposed to question God. Yet, that is what many of us are told. And I'm so glad that Job did not listen to his naysayers, his 3 boys, and his wife. And I'm so glad Marvin, Gaye, Jr. did not listen to his naysayers, and he had plenty of them. And don't you listen to the naysayers when you are in a Job season. In every situation, you can holler a praise up to God. You see, there was a crowd and disciples, and they were saying,